Hebrews, we've known them as Israelites, and now we're going to start saying the term Jews. The term Jew is not derogatory. Most people think that the term Jew comes from the tribe of Judah, because most of these exiles that are returning were from the tribe of Judah. So it's suspected that the term Jew comes from, at this point in time, those of Judah who were returning. So most of those people coming back were from the tribe of Judah, and they were faithful to worship God. And so hence all the God's people here have been come to be known as Jews. So the next thing we're going to see here, so this divide is deepening and widening. And we're going to start seeing all these accusations that the people of the land are trying to raise with the returnees from exile from the Jews. So let's read chapter 4, verses 6 through 16. And excuse me for some of these tongue-twisting names. I will try to get through them. But there are some tongue twisters in here. In the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. In the days of Artaxerxes also, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabal, and the rest of their companions wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And the letter was written in Aramaic script and translated into the Aramaic language. Rehum the commander and Shimshai the scribe wrote a letter against Jerusalem to King Artaxerxes in this fashion. So on these verses, this is a sample of the letter that might have been written or that was written to the king. From Rehum the commander, Shimshai the scribe, and the rest of their companions, representatives of the Dinaites, the Apharsathites, the Tarpelites, and the people of Persia and Iraq, and Babylon and Shushan, the Havites, the Elamites, and the rest of the nations whom the great and noble Osnappar took captive and settled in the cities of Samaria, and the remainder beyond the river, and so forth. Verse 11 starts, this is a copy of the letter that they sent to him. To King Artaxerxes, from your servants, the men of the region beyond the river, and so forth. Let it be known to the king that the Jews who came up from you have come to us at Jerusalem, and are building the rebellious and evil city, and are finishing its walls and repairing the foundations. Let it now be known to the king that if this city is built and the walls completed, they will not pay tax, tribute, or custom, and the king's treasury will be diminished. Now, because we received support from the palace, it was not proper for us to see the king's dishonor. Therefore, we have sent and informed the king, that search may be made in the book of the records of your fathers. And you will find in the book of the records and know that this city is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and provinces, and that they have incited sedition within the city in former times, for which cause this city was destroyed. We inform the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, the result will be that you will have no dominion beyond the river. So we have the people of the city, of the land, people of the land, acting on this great divide between them. And apparently, again, Jerusalem is on this dividing point. The people returnees have gathered lands of their forefathers. There's several different reasons why there's a jealousy there. But the historical order, as far as the Persian emperors go, typically begins, we read about Cyrus first. After him, his son Cambyses reigned a few years, but he was not named in the Bible. But after a short time, then we see Darius emerging as king. After him, Xerxes, Artaxerxes, And those people that study the language have, and many historians have thought that Xerxes is the same king as Ahasuerus of Ezra 4:6 in the book of Esther. So when we see Ahasuerus, most think that that's King Xerxes, referred to in other places. But during this time of Darius and Xerxes, the Persians, in attempting to conquest the area, they were attempting to bring all those Greek city-states under their control, but they failed to do that. So since this accusational letter, we see it was written to Ahasuerus or Xerxes, and it's addressing, it says an accusational letter addressing Artaxerxes is mentioned in verse 7. So there's some confusion about when some of these letters were written and to whom, but exactly what the timeline was for these letters of complaint to the kings. But certainly it's a tumultuous time in the kingdom, and we have conflicts arising between people of the land and those that are returning from exile. Because of this conflict and because of the jealousy and the efforts of the people of the land, we see there's no doubt several times that the construction on the temple and what the Jews were there to do halted and started various times during the years, during this opposition that they were trying to deal with. But the letter sent to Artaxerxes by the Jewish opponents, you can consider it kind of a summary of the complaints and charges that are brought against them on several occasions. So opponents of the Jews, they accused them of everything that they could think of. Some of the charges that they leveled against them were historical, had some substance behind them, but also some were subjective judgments made on behalf of the enemies. So first of all, as we look at this letter, the people that wrote it, the people of the land, they're starting this letter much in the way that Paul starts his letters in the New Testament. But these people are saying that they were the king's servants, the men of the region beyond the river, the great Euphrates River that separated Mesopotamia from Syria. So they are giving, like Paul did, their background, who they were, and what the context was of their letter and of their complaint. But like many similar letters, this is given as a guise. I'm not talking about Paul. I'm away from Paul now. But this letter is under a guise of they're doing the king a favor. So they're writing, the king said, Jerusalem's a rebellious city. If the rebuilding of the city continued, they're not going to pay tribute to you. The king's treasury is going to be diminished if you allow them to continue to build, because we have received so much support from Persia, the people of the land. They said, you've supported us greatly. We're sending this letter, this complaint, and it implies that they have no other motive but good motives to talk to the king, that they stand to gain nothing in writing other than their honor to the king that they have received support from. But in the letter they say, if you doubt what we say, they suggested, you may look into the archives of Persia. If you do, you will find the city was destroyed by your forefathers for its sedition. You must act quickly to stop them. Rebuilding has already begun. So with this animosity, they're going back to the time when tribute was withheld and when the first time they got taken away into Babylon, and how they did not pay tribute. So the people of the land are trying to insinuate that if the Jews rise to power, if they rebuild, they're going to stop paying you, Artaxerxes. You're going to stop paying you tribute and money, and they're going to control all the area on this side of the river. So this animosity continues to build, whether the base of it is, as we talked about, these returnees claimed their families' lands when they first came back. The animosity may be from the people of the land being excluded from being included in building the temple project. And when we read about this before on the temple project, support was given and payment was made to those Jews that were helping, and the Phoenicians that had great building skills. They were all being paid for their hard work, and they're very skilled laborers. So perhaps that entered into it, and these people of the land, they want, hey, they're getting paid for their work. We want to get paid too. That might have entered into it. So whatever the really underlying animosity was, they're starting to act on it. They're complaining to the king. They're making some of these stories up, looking back historically of what had happened in the past, and wanted the king to make them stop. So let's look then in chapter 4, verses 17 through 24. The king sent an answer to Rehum the commander, to Shimshai the scribe, to the rest of their companions who dwell in Samaria, and to the remainder beyond the river, peace and so forth. The letter which you sent to us has been clearly read before me, and I gave the command, and a search has been made, and it was found that this city in former times has revolted against kings, and rebellion and sedition have been fostered in it. There have also been mighty kings over Jerusalem who have ruled over all the region beyond the river, and tax, tribute, and custom were paid to them. Now give the command to make these men cease, that this city may not be built, and the command until the command is given by me. Take heed now that you do not fail to do this. Why should damage increase to the hurt of the kings? Now when the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rehum, Shimshai the scribe, and their companions, they went up in haste to Jerusalem against the Jews, and by force of arms made them cease. Thus the work of the house of God, which is at Jerusalem, ceased, and it was discontinued until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So once the king received their complaint letter, then he responds to them with a letter of his own. He acknowledged he did receive their letter. He says, I have made a search in the archives as you suggested. I have found, he said, that Jerusalem has revolted against former kings. It has been a source of rebellion and sedition, as you informed me. Important and powerful Judean kings have reigned from Jerusalem. In the past, rather than paying tribute, they collected tribute from provinces who currently owe tribute to me. Based on this information, I am commanding you to cause all rebuilding of the temple and the city to stop. Should you fail to act, you will be answerable to me. So with that, the letter of the king ends. So he's authorizing them to stop the construction. And in a short time, then Rehum, the king's personal representative, and Shimshai, the scribe, and others with him went up to Jerusalem. They forced the Jews to stop building. It was not the first time, as Scripture says, that the Jews had been forced to stop. Rebuilding the altar and the temple had begun when Cyrus as emperor. When Cambyses died and rivals, they were vying for the throne. There must have been a great deal of turmoil within the empire. So rebuilding the temple likely stopped and restarted several times. But during this 2nd year, we're told, 2nd year of Darius, the construction resumed. It was to begin and end several times, though, before completion. So the building of the altar of the temple was the beginning, was the first thing that they did to attempt to rebuild the structure. And Zerubbabel and Jeshua led this first round of efforts, and exactly, we read about Sheshbazzar earlier. We don't know exactly how he entered into all this. It kind of remains a mystery as far as historians. But many years later, Ezra and Nehemiah we're going to see arrive. Worship began, the walls of the city were completed, and the Jews are among the few people of the world who were captives that were able to return home and rebuild their city. Anybody have any comments or insight into any of that? Okay, let's go and move into chapter 5. In about 520, we talked about King Darius giving permission for this construction to restart. So at about that time, God raised up two prophets. We're going to see Haggai and Zechariah. And they urged the Jews to complete the assignment that Cyrus had given to them. So they, along with Malachi, are often called the post-exile prophets. That is, they lived and worked after the exile was over. So Haggai and Zechariah are numbers 10 and 11 among what we call the 12 minor prophets. Some years after Haggai and Zechariah, Malachi, name of Malachi means my messenger, began his work. There followed about 200-year span from 400 BC to about 200 BC, when the Jews themselves say they know little about what was happening in Jerusalem. But at the urging of Haggai and Zechariah, the leaders of the Jews, Zerubbabel and Jeshua, they resumed building the temple. And from the time of the Jewish discouragement by the people of the land and all that opposition until the second year of Darius, the efforts to build the temple stalled and failed out. But after the Jews began rebuilding, it wasn't long before enemies of the Jews appeared again and tried to put an end to the work. So those who wanted to stop the building of the temple changed. Earlier, they had been called adversaries of Judah and Benjamin, or the people of the land. The authors of the letter to Artaxerxes include Bishlam, Mithridath, and Tabal. The letter to Darius in Ezra 5 was written by Tatnai, identified as the governor of the region beyond the river, and Shethar-Boznai, the administrator of the affairs of the Persian provinces beyond the Euphrates, appear to have changed. So during all the turnover, some of these leaders have changed for the Persian magistrates. The second delegation we read about in chapter 5 did not succeed any more than those that we read about earlier in chapter 4. So they attempted it, but the construction restarted again. So God, in his providence, was allowing and making a way for his will to be done and these constructions to continue. So it'd be helpful to put the kingdom of Judah, who was originally conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, is restored by Cyrus. Let's put that into historical context. So for centuries before the fall of Jerusalem and Judah, power in Mesopotamia had been centered in Nineveh, city of Nineveh, located near modern Baghdad on the upper Tigris River. And Babylon, located in the southern portion of the Euphrates River, near where Terah and Abraham began their journey. For a brief period in the 11th and 10th centuries BC, the kingdom of Israel emerged in Canaan under David and Solomon. After the death of Solomon, the kingdom divided, never to become power it had been, but the northern portion of that kingdom from the beginning included the most of the people and the resources. And the southern portion retained the city of Jerusalem and the spiritual and emotional heart of the nation. So it was the home of the founders, David and Solomon, the northern kingdom being larger and more prosperous than the south, drew the attention of foreigners. And its capital city, Samaria, succumbed to the Syrians of Nineveh about 723 BC. So all this is rehashing some of the things that we've already talked about. The southern kingdom, it limped along under the succession of kings until 598 and 587 BC, and the Babylonians leveled Jerusalem. Babylon was essentially the empire of one man, Nebuchadnezzar. He and his father fought against and conquered Nineveh, and more importantly, they brought an end to the Assyrian and Egyptian power in the Mideast and the Battle of Carchemish. Nebuchadnezzar greatly expanded the defenses of Babylon until it was the most powerful city of its day. After he died, about 562, the empire did not last long. Babylon fell to Cyrus, the Persian king, in about 539. Shortly after he became king of Babylon, and Cyrus sent the Jews back to their homeland. So we talked about 539 before, about this rise to power of Cyrus. He conquered Babylon, and at that point, most people set that date as when the exiles are returning to the land. Well, let's read chapter 5. Let's read verses 1 through 5 as we wrap up here this morning. Then the prophet Haggai and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophets, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem, in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. So Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, rose up and began to build the house of God which is in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were with them, helping them. At the same time, Tatnai, the governor of the region beyond the river, and Shethar-Boznai and their companions came to them and spoke thus to them: Who has commanded you to build this temple and finish the wall? Then accordingly we told them the names of the men who were constructing this building. But the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, so that they could not make them cease until a report could go to Darius. Then a written answer was returned concerning this matter. So we'll pick up here next week. So we're going to see how the construction, we already saw how it stopped and started again under Darius, and how opposition raised initially from the people of the land who had lived there, who were left there, who had been brought in there from the Assyrians, and they were in opposition now to the returning Jews. But we're also going to see some additional opposition next week to their building and how they overcame that. So thank you for your attention this morning, and be looking forward to reading the rest of chapter 5 next week. Thank you.